Hello, I'm Steve Burig, the host of An Interview in History. This week, we're talking with Thomas Alva Edison, who was an American inventor and businessman. He developed many devices in fields such as electric power generation, mass communication, sound recording, and motion pictures. These inventions, which include the phonograph, the motion picture camera, and early versions of the electric light bulb, have had a widespread impact on the modern industrialized world. He was one of the first inventors to apply the principles of organized science and teamwork to the process of invention, working with many researchers and employees. He established the first industrial research laboratory. This interview takes place on February 6, 1931. Mr. Edison, it's an honor to speak with you today. Now, I will say that Mr. Edison is deaf in one ear and is very hard of hearing in the other ear, so he's using a hearing aid to amplify sound, and he can also read lips. Now, let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us about your parents? What did you say? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll sit closer and speak slower. There. I said, can you tell us about your parents? Oh, yes, thank you. I'm happy to share my story. My father, Samuel Edison, was a Canadian political activist who had to flee to the United States. He was a hardworking man, often involved in various business ventures. My mother, Nancy Elliott Edison, was a teacher, and I owe much of my education to her. She nurtured my curiosity and encouraged me to learn independently. That's wonderful. What was your childhood like? I was born on February 11, 1847 in Milan, Ohio. But we moved to Port Huron, Michigan when I was 7. I was an inquisitive child, always experimenting and taking things apart to see how they worked. However, I had a hearing problem from an early age, likely due to a bout of scarlet fever. It made school difficult, but I never let it hold me back. Mr. Edison, when did you start losing your hearing, and how did that affect your life? I began losing my hearing when I was a young boy, likely due to a combination of scarlet fever and repeated ear infections. Some say it worsened after a train conductor pulled me up by my ears when I was selling newspapers. At first it was frustrating, but over time I saw it as a blessing. My partial deafness allowed me to focus deeply on my work without distractions. I didn't have to hear the noise of the world, just the ideas in my head. It also helped me sleep well, even in noisy environments. However, it did make conversations difficult, and I often relied on written communication or reading lips. Did you have any siblings? Did I have what? Did you have any siblings? Oh, I had 6 siblings, though not all of them survived to adulthood. Their names were Marion, William, Carlisle, Samuel, Eliza, and Harriet. As the youngest, I wasn't particularly close with most of them because they were so much older than me. My independent nature and constant experimenting kept me occupied, and I spent more time tinkering and learning than socializing. My hearing loss also made communication more difficult. While I loved my family, I was always more focused on my inventions and ideas. Speaking of school, how was your formal education? Well, it was brief. I only attended school for a few months. My teacher thought I was slow because I asked too many questions. My mother, bless her, pulled me out and taught me at home. She introduced me to books and encouraged me to read widely. That's when I fell in love with science and learning. How did you begin your working career? My what? Your working career. Oh, Well, I began my career as a news butcher, selling newspapers, candy, and vegetables on trains running from Port Huron to Detroit. I turned a $50 a week profit by age 13, most of which went to buying equipment for electrical and chemical experiments. I obtained the exclusive right to sell newspapers on the road, and, with the aid of 4 assistants, I set in type and printed the Grand Trunk Herald, which I sold with my other papers. This began my long streak of entrepreneurial ventures, as I discovered my talents as a businessman. Ultimately, my entrepreneurship was central to the formation of some 14 companies, including General Electric, formerly one of the largest publicly traded companies in the world. Then at age 15, I saved 3-year-old Jimmy Mackenzie from being struck by a runaway train. Jimmy's father, Station Agent J.U. Mackenzie of Mount Clemens, Michigan, was so grateful he trained me as a telegraph operator. My first telegraphy job away from Port Huron was at Stratford Junction, Ontario, on the Grand Trunk Railway. I also studied qualitative analysis and conducted chemical experiments until I left the job rather than be fired after being held responsible for a near collision of 2 trains. At the age of 19, I moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where, as an employee of Western Union, I worked the Associated Press Bureau's newswire. I requested the night shift, which allowed me plenty of time to spend at my 2 favorite pastimes, reading and experimenting. Eventually, the latter preoccupation cost me my job. One night, I was working with a lead-acid battery when I spilled sulfuric acid onto the floor. It ran between the floorboards and onto my boss's desk below. The next morning, I was fired. That curiosity clearly played a role in your career. When did you first become interested in inventing? I started working at a young age, selling newspapers and candy on trains, like I said. I even set up a small chemistry lab in a baggage car. But my first real invention was an improved telegraph machine when I worked as a telegraph operator in my teens. From there, I realized I had a knack for improving existing technologies. Fascinating. Now let's talk about your personal life. Were you married? Did you have children? Yes, I was married twice. My first wife, Mary Stillwell, and I had 3 children, Marion, Thomas Jr., and William. Sadly, Mary passed away in 1884. A few years later, I married Mina Miller, and we had 3 more children, Madeline, Charles, and Theodore. Mina was a wonderful partner and helped manage our home and social affairs. Now, you are most famous for your inventions. So what do you consider your most significant contributions? I held over 1,000 patents, but some of my most important inventions include the phonograph, which could record and play sound, the practical electric light bulb, which helped bring light to homes and businesses, and improvements to the motion picture technology. My work with electricity, especially developing the direct current system, was crucial in shaping modern power distribution. So, what was your first patent? My what? What was your first patent? Oh, my first patent was for the electric vote recorder, U.S. patent number 90,646, which was granted on June 1, 1869. But finding little demand for the machine, I moved to New York City shortly thereafter. One of my mentors during those early years was a fellow telegrapher and inventor named Franklin Leonard Pope, who allowed me to live and work in the basement of his home while I worked for Samuel Laws at the Gold Indicator Company. Pope and I founded our own company in October 1869, working as electrical engineers and inventors. I began developing a multiplex telegraphic system, which could send two messages simultaneously in 1874. And you've invented so many amazing things. But what do you consider your most significant invention? My most what? Your most significant invention. Oh, that's a difficult question because each invention was built upon the last and they all served different purposes. However, if I had to choose, I'd say the electric light bulb had the greatest impact. Well, I didn't invent the first light bulb. I made it practical, affordable, long-lasting, and safe for everyday use. More importantly, I developed the entire electrical system to power it, including generators, wiring, and switches. This invention changed the world, bringing light to homes, businesses, and streets, allowing people to work and live beyond sunset. That said, I was also quite proud of the phonograph, the first machine that could record and play back sound. Seeing people's amazement when they heard their own voices played back for the first time was one of my proudest moments. Mr. Edison, I know the motion picture camera changed the world. How did you come about inventing that? And tell me about your motion picture studio. Yes. The motion picture industry wouldn't be what it is today without those early experiments. My interest in motion pictures came from my work with the phonograph. I thought, if we can record sound, why not record images as well? In the late 1880s, my team and I started developing the kinescope, a device that let people watch moving images through a peephole. We used a strip of film that ran rapidly over a light source with a shutter. It was crude compared to today's cinema, but it was revolutionary at the time. To create and refine these moving pictures, I built the world's first motion picture studio in 1893. We called it Black Maria because it resembled the black police wagons of the time. It had a retractable roof to let in sunlight, and the entire building was mounted on a track so we could rotate it to follow the sun. We made short films there, everything from simple scenes of dancers and boxers to dramatic reenactments. Though others later improved upon the technology, my early work laid the foundation for the film industry. It's incredible to think how far motion pictures have come. Now, you had a famous friendship with Henry Ford. How did that begin? With who? Henry Ford. You had a friendship with Henry Ford. Ah, Henry. He started as an engineer at one of my companies in the 1890s. We met at a conference and I encouraged him to pursue his dream of making automobiles affordable for the masses. We became lifelong friends, often traveling together and even building vacation homes near each other in Florida. He admired my work, and I admired his determination. That's incredible. So what was your later life like? In my later years, I've focused on research, particularly in rubber production and battery technology. I spend time at my laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey, but I also enjoy time with my family. My hearing has worsened, but I've never stopped experimenting and learning. Now, finally, Mr. Edison, I've heard that your philosophy on life is that it is nature, not God, that made us. Nature is what we know. We do not know the gods of religions, and nature is not kind or merciful or loving. If God made me, he also made the fish I catch and eat. And where do his mercy, kindness, and love for that fish come in? No, nature made us. Nature did it all. So then you don't believe in God. Now look, I fear you have misunderstood my intent, because you jump to the conclusion that it denies the existence of God. There's no such denial. What you call God, I call nature. the supreme intelligence that rules matter. Furthermore, I believe it is doubtful, in my opinion, if our intelligence or soul or whatever one may call it lives hereafter as an entity or disperses back again from whence it came, scattered amongst the cells of which we are made. I do not believe in the God of the theologians, but that there is a supreme intelligence I do not doubt. Well, that's quite interesting. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Mr. Edison. My pleasure. And remember, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Edison was active in business right up to the end. Just months before his death, the Lackawanna Railroad inaugurated suburban electric train service from Hoboken to Montclair, Dover, and Gladstone, New Jersey. Electrical transmission for this service was by means of an overhead catenary system using direct current, which Edison had championed. Despite his frail condition, Edison was at the throttle of the first electric train to depart Lackawanna Terminal in Hoboken in September 1930, driving the train for the first mile through Hoboken Yard on its way to South Orange. Edison died of complications from diabetes on October 18, 1931, in his home, Glenmont, in Llewellyn Park in West Orange, New Jersey, which he had purchased in 1886 as a wedding gift for Mina. The Reverend Stephen J. Herman officiated at the funeral. Edison is buried behind the home. Edison's last breath is reportedly contained in a test tube at the Henry Ford Museum near Detroit. Ford reportedly convinced Charles, Edison's son, to seal a test tube of air in the inventor's room shortly after his death as a memento. A plastic death mask and casts of Edison's hands were also made. His wife Mina died in 1947. And now, another forgotten history. George Wright, one of the first All-Stars of professional baseball as he played shortstop for the Cincinnati Red Stockings in 1869. He played several years in professional baseball before taking a business venture in opening the Wright and Ditson sporting goods business. In 1886, he is said to have brought over one of the first set of golf clubs into the United States and had them on display at one of his sporting goods stores in Boston, where it is said a passerby from Scotland saw them and explained the game to Wright. He would use his knowledge for golf to get a permit for a small golf course in 1890, which is now known as the William J. Devine Golf Course, the second oldest public golf course in America. He would also donate land used for a course opened in 1938 under his name, the George Wright Golf Course, still functioning today in Boston. It's also said he helped with historical origins of baseball to a research group and was asked to consult on the 1939 centennial celebrations and establishments of the National Baseball Hall of Fame, to which he was elected by a special committee in 1937. However, he would pass in August 1937 at the age of 90. Join us next week when we talk with Molly Brown, known as the unsinkable Molly Brown because of the Titanic. Until then, take care.